Hi everyone. You'll remember this pic from a couple of months ago, no doubt, a couple of weeks ago I think it was. This is a gentleman who challenged Boris Johnson when he was visiting an NHS hospital over the state of the NHS. And I think he called him out as basically saying that this was some sort of PR stunt or something like that. And Boris Johnson said, "There's no cameras here." And he was like, "Yeah, there they are. They're over there." It was a bit of a disaster for Boris, that was. Now, this gentleman turned out to be some sort of Labour activist, and the Conservative trolls on Twitter went to work, outing him as such, and basically saying that negates everything he said. It was like he was visiting his daughter in NHS, I think, or one of his children. Anyway, it was a bit of a disaster for Boris Johnson, that was. But regardless of it, he's kept visiting NHS hospitals. And now we've got a picture of what really happens at one of these NHS hospitals when Boris Johnson visits one, because a doctor has told all. Take a look. Hi everyone. So this is something that I saw on Twitter yesterday, last night. This is from somebody called Hindu Monkey. This is the truth of what happens when Boris Johnson visits your hospital. This has been written by an anonymous friend of mine. Please read, please share. It is the truth about our NHS. The lies cannot continue. Now, I was going to do a video about this today because I found another source that another person who'd verified that this is actually an NHS doctor and this letter is real. And it's this person's account of what really goes on behind the scenes. You're going to be angry again. You're going to be angry. So this is the letter that the NHS doctor at one of those hospitals that Boris visited. Now, I think it's Penzance or somewhere like that, this hospital is. I think because the Mirror have done an article about it today. But anyway, I'm going to read this in full, just so you know the gravitas of how important it is, what this doctor is saying. He says this: "I am an NHS doctor, and Boris Johnson visited my hospital recently. We were only told on the day for security purposes. They painted the ward I worked on. So they painted it. They were only told on the day, and they painted it on that day as well. We were asked to hide dirty laundry. Cleaners were sent out into the car park on a rainy, cold day, picking leaves off the ground. We were told he was going to use our acute area as a, quote, meet and greet. Then we were asked if we wanted to meet him. Every doctor in the hospital said no. Surprising that, isn't it? They could not find a single consultant who was willing to meet him. The consultant who was on the rota for the day was not there, and the rumour on the ground was that he had said he would not let Johnson onto the ward. Instead, the on-call consultant was replaced with another consultant, one high up in the management. He was also trying to do a ward round to see newly admitted, acutely unwell patients. There were more management and executives than I'd ever seen. There were young men in expensive suits, looking around themselves at us like tourists on safari. In the end, a handful of people agreed to meet him. One allied healthcare professional was so angry at his presence she could not stop shaking, but wanted to let him know just how unhappy she was. There was also a nurse who didn't follow politics and didn't really understand what the fuss was about. There was one healthcare assistant who was very excited he was there because he had seen his dad on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. She didn't know exactly who he was, but she loved his dad and wanted a selfie. No. By the way, whoever that person is, that's the only sort of person that Boris Johnson would attract. Somebody who doesn't know what they are doing to the very core of the United Kingdom, which I think is our NHS. There was a photo of that, of his dad, of I'm a Celebrity. Oh, sorry, there was a photo of that, of Boris Johnson with that woman that made the papers. Hers was the sole smile I saw that day when he visited. The atmosphere was tense and unpleasant, furious and sullen. Myself and two nurses were trying to see patients whilst hiding in rooms so we wouldn't meet him by accident. That's the Prime Minister of this country. I could feel my ability to safely see extremely unwell patients was slipping, both by the physical space provided, the wet painted walls, his enormous entourage, but also at the stress of our hospital being visited by the very people who had caused us such damage. It was like being visited at home by your abusive boyfriend asking, "What can I do to help?" Imagine that. Imagine that. You know, you can certainly feel how, the people of Venezuela feel, knowing how punishing sanctions are crippling them, and then US aid appears at the border and says, let us help you. A number of people, staff and patients, were hanging around the entrance to see him arrive, but he was brought in quietly through the side door. He did not meet anyone other than the people who had been seen by his team first. Trying to obviously control the narrative as they do. Let me just hide my image so you can see the rest of it. There was some booze, and some people turned their backs. One member of staff dropped her glasses on the floor to avoid shaking his hand. Wow! She dropped her glasses on the floor to avoid shaking his hand. Every patient I saw that day told me to keep him away from them. I'd give him a slap, somebody said. Kick him out of their hospital, another said, showing me texts from their relatives after they'd told them he was there. Tell them he's a cunt, one of them showed. This is a northern leave town. That's a good point, that is. This is a northern leave town. I'm going to come back to that at the end of this. I think this does have broader ramifications. There was staged, why is that messed up? There were staged photos. It's all. There were staged photos. Someone prepared some tea and it sat there until it was cold. Then Johnson pretended to make it and poured it out for the staff, who were obliged to drink cold tea while they took photos of Johnson serving on them. How? I mean, oh, come on. How can you say this is not a PR stunt? They're setting up photos of him serving tea to the nurses. This makes me sick. There were two very large men in scrubs which no one had seen before, standing around cross-armed. One of the nurses asked them who they were. Quote, "We're anaesthetists," he replied. I don't know, maybe they were anaesthetists. We'd never met them before. I'd have asked them for an ID badge if I'd seen him. The hospital had been asking for funding to move one ward to a better location over 5 years. For over 5 years. So for over 5 years, I've been asking to move one ward to a better location. This has been constantly refused by the Conservative government. On this day, it was granted. So, what does that say to you? Seriously, what does that say to you? On the day, they suddenly get the funding that they've been asking for over 5 years. Either that is a government that just wasn't listening to them for 5 years, or basically a government that's bribing a hospital to let the Prime Minister of this country have a visit to it so he can have some photos of him serving cold tea to the nurses. Sickens me. It was a busy shift. A&E were out of bed. He's describing the rest of the day here. As usual, and I dashed past sick 90-year-olds waiting on trolleys and corridors on my way to Resus to see the sickest. It's not yet winter, but in the NHS, it's always winter now. When I read that out last night, I sat here with my girlfriend and we went, Jesus Christ. Both of us at the same time in unison. And we're not religious. Let me repeat that. It's not yet winter, but in the NHS, it's always winter now. He left eventually with all his suited sycophants, and we tried to pick up the pieces of the shift. Some staff too angry to work. Some staff almost too angry to work after he left, that was. I recall the impotent shaking fury of a friend of mine, a nurse with white paint on his arm where he'd accidentally knocked a freshly painted wall. Sick patients hadn't properly been reviewed with the distraction, and the numbers from accident and emergency were piling in. Obviously, this caused a big problem for the hospital. It was a big interruption for them. A hospital already creaking by the look of it under the NHS cuts and Tory austerity policies. Sick patients hadn't been reviewed with the distraction, and the numbers from A&E were piling in. I had a blinding headache and felt rattled. It was probably midday the next day before flow calmed a bit. I worked 12 hours that day, and the next and the next. A nearby hospital went on to divert one of those days. It too overwhelmed to be able to take in new patients, so they were sent to us. Again, the rammed corridors of the sick and the old, left in corridors when we don't even have the bed space to see them. The queuing ambulances outside waiting for somebody free to hand over to. Hospitals on divert has happened with terrible frequency over recent years in the winter and is always very unsafe. This is not typical for November. He's basically painting a picture here that it's getting far, far worse than it has been, and it's already been absolutely disgusting. The chief executive apologised to me for how hard the day had been and acknowledged our fury, but said the important thing is they had been allowed their funding. So we'll go through it all, yes, because we want the funding. Isn't that quid pro quo? Somebody tell the Democrats over in America. After all this time, I said, thank you for the crumbs, he said. That's electioneering. There was some talk of voting afterwards and making sure everyone was registered to vote. What else can we do? Get in the streets, I suggest, mate. Because it's the only way this is going to change. I don't think voting is going to change it. He goes on to conclude with this. I have been a doctor for 9 years. Almost every doctor I know has an exit plan. They're promising 50,000 more nurses. Where are they going to get that from? If 18,000 then, they're going to have to convince the state to begin with, and that gets included in their figures. Sorry, I'll repeat this closing statement again. I have been a doctor for 9 years. Almost every doctor I know has an exit plan. So many have already gone, without hope that things are going to change. I don't know how many more NHS winters I have left in me. That doctor is obviously somebody who cares immensely about the work he does. It's a calling for people. You don't become a doctor to become rich, unless you're some sort of, surgeon or plastic surgeon, I suppose. The primary reason people become doctors is because they want to help the sick. The same with nurses. And we have made their job so hard, they don't want to do the very thing that they are being called to do. I've just described to you what goes on during one of those PR stunts that Boris Johnson is going on at the moment. The reason he's going on these PR stunts at the moment and trying to give you a skewed view of really just how bad the NHS is in and the state it's in. The reason he's doing that is because Labour have obviously said, right, okay, you want to make Brexit your main focus in this election. We're going to make the standard that our NHS has dropped to under your government and your austerity plans as ours. And if there's one subject that will make even the most die-hard Brexiteer put his stance on Brexit on the shelf for a while, it's the thought of, if he has it, he'll lose the NHS. We in the United Kingdom, the working person, if they think for a second that the NHS is under threat in the next Tory government, they won't vote for it, regardless of what Boris Johnson is fucking saying about Brexit. Which, let's face it, it's all lies anyway. Why are you believing him now? You will never get the NHS back once it's lost. It'll be too hard to get back. But I think voters will come to realise, you know what? we might get another, we're probably going to get another vote on Brexit no matter what we do. The NHS might be too important right now. And you know what? That might make a huge dent in the so-called lead that the bloody ridiculous polls are saying that Conservatives have got over Labour. Honestly, don't trust the polls, everybody. They are there to influence opinion, not to inform it. That's the state of the doctor is saying in that NHS hospital. I think it was in Pembrokeshire, although I'll have to check on that. The NHS is the one thing that a Brexiteer will abandon his beliefs on Brexit, or at least put it to the side. Dave, the NHS is the one thing. We'll see whether Corbyn's a good enough campaigner to make that stick, but I certainly think he's had a good start, and there's still a few weeks to go. Remember, he closed a 19-point gap, as supposedly, on Theresa May. A lot of people were saying that those polls were skewed back then. You'd think people would learn their lesson. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. Please make sure you're subscribed and click the bell below so you get a notification of when I drop further videos. And click through to the website as well so you can find out ways to support me. Support independent media, everybody. Let's make Orwell fiction again. Thanks very much for watching. Take care. See you soon.